Welcome to our channel. Today, we're talking about the book, What Everybody is Saying, an ex-FBI agent's guide to speed reading people by Joe Navarro.
Oh, this is a good one. I bet you were hooked from the first chapter.
Totally. It's packed with these incredible stories from Navarro's time in the FBI. But what's fascinating is how he uses those experiences to teach us about everyday body language.
hmm
It's like, look, you don't need to be a trained agent to understand what people are really thinking.
It's all about tapping into that honest brain, as he calls it, right? The limbic system.
Exactly, that primal part of our brain that reacts instinctively. Navarro argues that it's where our most genuine emotions come through, often leaking out in our body language, even when we try to control our words.
And that makes it super valuable. We can spend so much time analyzing what people say, but their nonverbal cues might be telling a completely different story. This book gives you the tools to start picking up on those signals.
It's like learning a secret code. And one of the first things Navarro emphasizes is the power of observation.
Right. It's not just about seeing, it's about truly observing. Noticing those subtle shifts in behavior, the way someone's foot turns away when they're losing interest, or how their pupils dilate when they're genuinely engaged.
He even tells this story about a suspect in a murder case who inadvertently revealed the murder weapon through a tiny eyelid movement.
Yes, I remember that one. His eyelids clamped down hard when the actual weapon was mentioned, a classic example of the freeze response in action.
It's incredible how even the smallest gestures can speak volumes.
Absolutely. And building on that, Navarro explains how the limbic system's fight, flight, or freeze response shows up in more subtle ways in everyday situations.
Okay, so give me an example of that. How would that play out, say, in a meeting at work?
Let's say you're pitching a new idea and you notice your colleague suddenly shifts their feet toward the exit. That could be their limbic system triggering a flight response, signaling they're uncomfortable or disagree with what you're saying.
That's so subtle, I probably wouldn't even pick up on it.
That's why Navarro stresses the importance of understanding baselines. Once you know how someone typically behaves, you can start to recognize those subtle deviations that might signal a shift in their thinking or feeling.
So, like, if someone is usually very expressive with their hands, but then suddenly keeps them hidden under the table during a negotiation, that could be a red flag.
Exactly. And it works both ways. Navarro talks about ventral fronting, which is when we lean in toward something that interests us. It's like our body's way of showing engagement and receptiveness. So if you see someone leaning in while you're talking, that's a good sign.
I'm starting to see the world in a whole new light. Every interaction is suddenly packed with potential meaning.
That's the beauty of this book. It really does open your eyes to a whole new level of communication. But you're right, it can be a lot to take in. One thing I found helpful was to focus on specific body parts and really understand the nuances of their nonverbal cues.
Okay, so where should we start? Maybe feet and legs. Navarro talks about happy feet, right?
He does. And while bouncing feet can sometimes indicate joy, he warns that they could also signal impatience or a desire to escape a situation.
So how do we tell the difference?
Context is key. Who are they with? What's the situation? Are there any other cues that support or contradict that happy feet interpretation?
It's like being a detective. Okay, so let's say someone's feet are pointed towards the door, but they're also leaning in and making good eye contact. What would that tell us?
That's a great example of mixed signals, and Navarro has a helpful tip for that. He calls it the rule of mixed signals, and it essentially means you should side with the negative emotion as it's usually the more honest one.
So in that case, the feet pointed toward the door might be the more reliable indicator.
Exactly. It's likely their limbic system is picking up on something that's making them uncomfortable, even if they're trying to appear engaged.
Wow, this is fascinating.
Hmm.
Okay, so we've talked about feet. What about legs?
Navarro highlights the knee clasp, where someone grabs their knee as if they're about to spring out of their chair. It often indicates they're ready to leave a meeting or conversation.
I've totally done that before, especially when I'm bored or feeling trapped.
We all have, but being aware of these cues can help us adjust our own behavior. Maybe it's time to wrap things up or shift gears if you see someone doing the knee clasp.
Now, before we go any further, I want to take a quick moment to give a shout out to the Affirmify Journey YouTube channel. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the power of observation, you might also love their content on positive affirmations and mindset. They have tons of great videos on using affirmations to boost your confidence and achieve your goals. Okay, back to the book. What other body parts does Navarro break down?
Well, he talks about the torso and how it can reveal a lot about our comfort levels. He mentions ventral denial, which is when we turn away from something that makes us uncomfortable.
It's like our body's instinctively trying to protect our vulnerable front side.
Precisely. Think about it, when you see someone you don't like, Do you turn towards them or subtly angle your body away?
I definitely turn away. I never even realized I was doing that.
It's subconscious, but it's a powerful signal. On the flip side, ventral fronting, where we lean in, shows engagement and interest.
I'm starting to see how this could be really helpful in understanding dynamics in a group setting.
Absolutely. Imagine you're observing a team meeting. Who's leaning in? Who's turning away? Those nonverbal cues can give you valuable insights into the group's dynamics.
It's like having X-ray vision into people's true feelings. So we've talked about the lower body and the torso. What about arms?
Well, Navarro points out how arm withdrawal can be a subtle form of distancing. If someone pulls their arms in close to their body, it could suggest they're feeling insecure or threatened.
What about the opposite? Like someone who takes up a lot of space with their arms.
Navarro talks about the classic arms akimbo stance, hands on hips, elbows out. This one's interesting because it can convey confidence, but it can also be perceived as aggressive, especially in certain contexts.
I can see how that could escalate a situation, especially if someone's already feeling tense.
He specifically mentions how this stance can be problematic in law enforcement. It can make a suspect feel cornered and increase the likelihood of a confrontation.
So even seemingly positive body language can have unintended consequences.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to be mindful of not only what our body language is communicating, but also how it might be interpreted by others, especially those from different backgrounds.
This is so insightful. I'm already starting to rethink some of my own habits and mannerisms.
We all do it, but that's the beauty of learning about body language. It helps us become more conscious communicators, both in terms of sending and receiving messages.
Okay, so we've covered feet, legs, torso, and arms. Let's move on to hands. Navarro dedicates a whole chapter to decoding hand behaviors, right?
He does, and for good reason. Hands are incredibly expressive. Think about how much we gesture with our hands when we talk, even when we're not consciously aware of it.
So like someone who talks with their hands a lot is probably pretty animated and expressive.
Exactly. And conversely, someone who keeps their hands hidden or tightly clasped might be holding back or feeling anxious.
I don't know, I tend to fidget with my hands when I'm nervous, like playing with my rings or fiddling with my pen.
That's a common one. Navarro points out that hand-wringing is a classic sign of stress. He even mentions a study where researchers found that people who wrung their hands during a mock job interview were rated as less competent by the interviewers.
So it's not just about what we say, it's also about how our hands are behaving during those crucial moments.
Precisely. And speaking of hands, Navarro also talks about the power of palm displays.
Palm displays.
Yes. He explains that open palms are generally perceived as a sign of honesty and trustworthiness.
Interesting. I wonder if that's why some cultures use open palms as a gesture of peace or surrender.
It's very possible. Navarro also mentions that clenched fists can signal aggression or defensiveness, while hidden thumbs often indicate low confidence. And then there are the various interpretations of thumb displays, from the classic thumbs up to the more subtle thumbs tucked into pockets.
You're making me super aware of my own hands right now.
We all do it. But that's the point, right? This book raises your awareness and makes you realize how much we're communicating without even saying a word.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground with the hands. What about the face? That's got to be the most expressive part of the body, right?
It is, but it's also the one we're most adept at controlling.
Yeah.
Think about it. We learn to mask our true emotions with facial expressions from a very young age.
Like forcing a smile when you get a present you don't actually like.
Exactly. We become masters of deception with our faces. That's why Navarro stresses the importance of looking beyond the obvious. He points out the subtle differences between a genuine smile and a fake one.
So how can we tell the difference?
A genuine smile, what Navarro calls the Duchenne smile, engages the muscles around the eyes, creating those little crinkles we often call crow's feet. A fake smile usually only involves the mouth.
Oh, wow. I'm realizing I might have been fooled by a few fake smiles in my life.
We all have, but the more you practice observing these micro-expressions, the better you'll get at distinguishing between genuine and feigned emotions.
What other facial cues should we be paying attention to?
Well, Navarro talks about lip compression as a sign of stress or disapproval. When we press our lips together, it's like we're trying to hold back our true feelings.
I've definitely done that during some awkward conversations.
We all have. It's a natural response when we're feeling uncomfortable or pressured.
Okay, so lip compression check. Anything else?
He also mentions the sneer, which is basically a one-sided lip raise. It's a universal sign of contempt and disrespect.
Yeah, not a good look.
Definitely not. It's a major red flag in any relationship, whether it's personal or professional.
It seems like every part of our face can tell a story.
Absolutely. And the more you understand these subtle cues, the more you'll be able to read between the lines what people are saying.
This is all incredibly insightful.
Mm.
Now, I know we've been talking a lot about reading other people's body language, but what about our own? How can we use this knowledge to improve our own communication?
That's a great question. And it's something Navarro addresses in the book as well. He emphasizes that becoming aware of our own nonverbals is crucial for effective communication.
So, like, if I realize I'm constantly fidgeting during presentations, I should try to control those movements.
Exactly. By becoming aware of our own body language, we can make sure we're projecting the image we want and avoid sending unintended messages.
It's like taking control of our own silent messaging system.
I love that analogy. It's about becoming more conscious communicators, both in terms of sending and receiving messages.
This is also fascinating. I feel like I've only scratched the surface of what this book has to offer.
There's so much more to explore, but this is a great start. You've already learned about the importance of observation, understanding baselines, and recognizing those subtle limbic responses that leak out in our body language.
And we've only just begun to decode the secrets of the feet, legs, torso, arms, hands, and face.
We've got a whole world of nonverbal communication to uncover. You know, one of the most intriguing parts of the book for me was when Navarro dives into the question of deception.
Ah, yes. Can we actually use body language to spot a liar? I bet that's what most people are curious about.
It is, but Navarro is quick to point out that there's no magic formula. There's no single telltale sign that guarantees someone is being deceptive.
So no Pinocchio nose twitch.
Nope, unfortunately not. He emphasizes that reading deception is complex. You have to consider patterns, baselines, and the context.
It sounds like it's more art than science.
In a way, yes. It requires careful observation and a deep understanding of human behavior.
Navarro does share some compelling stories about how he used body language to uncover deception in his FBI investigations, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. One that sticks out is the story about the woman who falsely reported her child's kidnapping. He describes how her demeanor was unusually subdued, lacking the emotional intensity you'd expect from a distraught mother.
So her body language didn't match her words.
Exactly. That discrepancy raised red flags for the investigators, and as it turned out, she had tragically fabricated the kidnapping story.
That's heartbreaking. But it also highlights the importance of looking for those inconsistencies.
Absolutely. While certain behaviors might be associated with deception, they can also indicate other emotions like stress anxiety or even just plain discomfort.
So how do we avoid misinterpreting those signals? How do we know if someone's nervous because they're lying or just because they're, say, introverted or uncomfortable in a particular situation?
That's a great question, and it goes back to the importance of understanding baselines. You have to know how someone typically behaves in order to spot deviations that might signal something's off.
Okay, so let's say I'm having a conversation with someone and I notice they're avoiding eye contact. Does that mean they're lying to me?
Not necessarily. Some people naturally avoid eye contact. It could be cultural, or they might just be shy. The key is to compare their current behavior to their baseline. Are they avoiding eye contact more than usual? Are there other cues that support that interpretation?
So like if they're also fidgeting, sweating, or their voice is shaky, those could be additional signs that something's not right.
Exactly. Navarro talks about looking for clusters of behaviors. One isolated cue might not tell the whole story, but when you see multiple cues pointing in the same direction, that's when you should start paying closer attention.
It's like piecing together a puzzle.
I like that analogy. And to help with that puzzle-solving process, Navarro introduces this helpful concept called the rule of mixed signals.
Okay, what's that?
It basically means that when you encounter mixed signals, for instance, a smile accompanied by tense shoulders, you should side with the negative emotion, as it's usually the more honest one.
So in that case, the tense shoulders would be the more reliable indicator of the person's true feelings.
Exactly. The limbic system reacts instinctively to threats or discomfort, and those initial reactions are harder to mask. Think about it, it's much easier to force a smile than it is to relax your shoulders when you're feeling tense.
That makes a lot of sense. So if I'm in a situation where I suspect someone might be lying, I should focus on those subtle signs of discomfort rather than just taking their words at face value.
Exactly. But remember, the goal here is not to become a human lie detector. It's about using these insights to improve communication, build stronger connections, and navigate social situations with greater awareness.
It's about understanding the subtle nuances of human behavior.
Precisely. By becoming more attuned to nonverbal cues, we can gain a deeper understanding of the people around us and interact with them more effectively.
It's like becoming fluent in a secret language. But this language isn't spoken. It's expressed through those almost imperceptible shifts in posture, gestures, and facial expressions.
I love that analogy. It gives you a framework for interpreting behaviors that you might have previously overlooked.
So to recap, when it comes to deception detection, there's no magic bullet.
Mm.
It's about careful observation, understanding baselines, and looking for clusters of behaviors, especially those subtle limbic responses that are harder to control.
And it's about using that knowledge responsibly and ethically. The goal is to enhance communication, not to manipulate or exploit others.
It's about building stronger, more authentic connections by understanding what everybody is saying, even when words are left unspoken.
Beautifully said. It's a fascinating journey of discovery, and this book is a great place to start.
We've covered so much ground today, from happy feet to sneering lips and everything in between.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this deep dive into Joe Navarro's What Everybody is Saying, I'd love to hear what stood out to you. What were some of the most surprising or insightful takeaways?
Yeah, you know what's fascinating to me is how Navarro debunks that myth of the perfect lie detector.
Right, he emphasizes that there's no magic formula or single telltale sign that guarantees someone is being deceptive.
Exactly. It's about recognizing patterns, understanding baselines, and considering the context. He even shares those examples of how seemingly obvious behaviors like fidgeting or avoiding eye contact can be totally misinterpreted.
It's not about jumping to conclusions, but rather about observing subtle shifts in behavior and interpreting them carefully.
Precisely. And I appreciate how Navarro emphasizes the ethical implications of using these insights. It's not about manipulating or exploiting others, but rather about enhancing communication and building stronger connections.
It's about using this knowledge responsibly and with respect for others.
Absolutely. And for me, one of the most valuable takeaways is the importance of self-awareness.
Being mindful of our own body language and how it might be perceived by others.
Exactly. By understanding the nonverbals we're projecting, we can ensure our communication is aligned with our intentions.
Like taking control of our own silent messaging system.
I love that. It's about becoming more conscious communicators, both in terms of sending and receiving messages.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I encourage our listeners to embrace the power of observation.
Pay attention to those subtle cues, those unspoken messages that reveal so much about the human experience.
And remember, every interaction is an opportunity to learn and grow.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering the fascinating world of what everybody is saying.
And for those wanting to explore the power of positive affirmations and mindset, we recommend checking out the Affirmify Journey YouTube channel.
So that's a great resource.
And for listeners who want to further develop their skills in this area, lingopediamagazine.com offers a range of courses and ebooks.
That's fantastic. I love that resource.
Really is. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe, share, and like this podcast. We'll see you next time.